Welcome back to Montana's State University's Montana Agriculture Experiment Station's virtual field day question and answers. We've had some very robust discussions this morning, starting at 9 o'clock in the a.m. I want to thank everybody for joining us on YouTube. It's unfortunate that the current pandemic has caused us to take our field days online. But I can tell you there's at least 56 videos that have been edited and put on our webpage for you to look at. And there's some really great opportunities for educational chances there. I'm pretty proud of all the researchers and their staff and people that stepped up and made those videos. I can speak for myself and probably most of the people that we're going to have in the next hour is that, field days are outstanding amount of work, but it's one of the best days of the year because we get to spend time and interact with our producers, our ag allied industries. And although it's unfortunate that we can't be in person, we're going to give it a go online, maybe try and embrace some of the new technology, and we'll see how it goes. And for this next section, we have several researchers from Montana State University. We'll go quickly around the room. We have Dr. Perry Miller, whose base camp is in Bozeman, Kevin McPhee, also in Bozeman, Dr. Zach Miller from Western Ag Research Center, Dr. Pat Carr from Moccasin, and Dr. Abby Saeed down in Bozeman, who's our new extension horticulturist. With that, Abby, why don't you start us out?
Sure. Hi, I'm Abby Saeed. I have been on the job for just under 1 month, and I'm starting to learn about what people in Montana are experiencing for pests, disease, and abiotic issues in their home gardens. And I'm excited to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Pat, would you like this try? Go that way.
You bet. Good morning, everyone. I'm Pat Carr. I'm at the Central Ag Research Center, as Darren said, just outside of Moccasin. I got my degree at Montana State University many years ago. I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to come back, and we've been back in Montana about 5 years now, so it's great to be here today.
Thanks, Pat. Kevin.
Hi, yeah, I'm Kevin McPhee, pulse crop breeder located here in Bozeman. I've been directing the program here, a brand new program for 3 years, 3.5 years, I guess now. This is my 4th field season, making some good progress and pretty excited with what I'm seeing in the field this year. So as everybody is implied, it's unfortunate we won't be able to walk through the fields and take a look at things, but happy to describe what we've got going and happy to send pictures if somebody were interested in that. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. Perry.
Perry Miller. I'm a cropping system scientist here in Bozeman, and it means I get to work a lot with alternative crops and various soil management techniques, usually with some eye to sustainability. And I was smarter than the rest of these guys. I got here 22 years ago.
Thanks for being here so long, Perry. Welcome to the 20 club. So we're going to start right out with Kevin. Kevin, this came in last meeting. I think you could add some to the dialogue. It came in from Choteau County. What's happening with the winter broadleaf crops, and when do you foresee that be impacting Montana's producers?
Okay. So the winter pulse crops, right now, as far as the breeding program is concerned, we are looking at the winter peas, thinking about winter lentils, but primarily now it's the winter peas that we're focused on. I made crosses the first year I was here, the first spring actually in the greenhouse. The products from that, we actually have unreplicated or single plot nursery at Bozeman to look at that first material, and pretty excited with some of the material that's in there. We don't have any yield tests. Those particular lines have not been tested over the winter. So that's the plan for this fall. The intent was to plant them last year. Weather conditions didn't allow us to do that. So this fall, I'm hopeful to get those, depending on the amount of seed we harvest, at 2 to 3 locations and see what they'll do. What we have also done is sent out segregating populations to different research centers. I've had them at Havre for 2 years now. I had one the first year at Conrad, another nursery this year at Huntley. All 4 of those survived, all 4 locations. We were able to make selections in both years. There was good differential kill. So it gives me some confidence that we've been able to remove some of the weak lines, select more hardy lines, and those will be the first ones that have been tested, been proven to at least survive those conditions. We're increasing the seed from that, and we'll advance those into yield trial type nurseries that we can have some confidence that they'll survive. As far as impacting Montana agriculture, I think that's a little bit out in the future. I think I have good confidence at this point with what I'm looking at and the selections I've made, but there certainly has to be further testing. We have grants put together for that. A lot of interest from other entities that I'll be working with on that. So I think the future looks good. I know Perry's interested in having some different types of winter peas. He's seen some of what I have there by some of his plots. So I'm hopeful that we'll have something to look at in the near future.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Good thing, Zach, you're the first question I've got. Someone said they heard you talking about nutraceuticals in your berries. So could you please introduce yourself, explain to someone in Granite County what nutraceuticals and what the value is of the research you're working on at Western Ag, please?
Yeah, so my name is Zach Miller. I'm the superintendent of the MSU Western Ag Research Center, and we're the Horticultural Research Center in our research center system. And we do a lot of work with both fruit and vegetable crops and a lot of other specialty crops, in addition to collaborating with folks like Kevin and other scientists to do variety evaluations. So nutraceuticals, it's a fancy word for just eating healthy foods. A lot of the buzz in the last 5 years or so has been on antioxidants, and so about that long ago we started a project looking at cold hardy fruits that have good antioxidant potential. So antioxidants are chemicals that are in lots of different foods that are healthy because they stop free radicals, which are particles in our bodies that damage DNA and cell membranes and lead to things like inflammatory disease and cancer. So we're growing over 50 different varieties of cold hardy fruits that include honeyberries or hascaps, elderberry, and aronia. And those three have at least 3 times the antioxidant capacity as blueberries, and also includes black currants, service berries, and a few other things.
And I can testify, if you get a chance to go to Western Ag Research Center's field day, you get to taste them all. You just can't taste the ones that are on the plants before you get to harvest them, right?
Yeah.
So it's a good field day to go to. Thanks, Zach. Abby, there's a question on end blossom rot. And I'm not a vegetable or tomato guy. I try to keep them off my plate, but could you talk a little bit about that? And is there variety differences that happen, and how can people prevent that?
Yeah, so blossom end rot is something that happens when there is a calcium deficiency in the plant and the fruit ends up showing the symptom of black spreading from the blossom end up towards the fruit. Lots of different plants are susceptible to this: tomatoes, peppers, summer squash, melons. But this doesn't mean that the calcium in the soil isn't there. It's usually as a result of inconsistent watering. So if you have a consistent watering schedule going and adequate water being provided to the plants, that should help this. But otherwise, it's pretty unpleasant and it does rot the fruit. So it ends up reducing your yield.
So is there a variety differences there? That was the other part of the question, sorry. Yep.
There are cultivars that are more resistant to this. There are cultivars that are more resistant to this, but mostly it's management. So as long as you are consistently watering your plants on a regular interval, as opposed to just giving them water whenever you remember.
Perfect. Perry, this is coming in again, and it's very similar to the question we had when Chen C was on. We hear that you've grown hemp and have some input. And how do you see industrial hemp fitting into Montana's rotations? Or how do you see it impacting Montana?
That's a good question. There's lots of questions about hemp right now. From a rotational perspective, myself, well, let me first say that Pat Carr, myself, and Shensi have been playing with hemp a little bit the last 3 years. And I've got a video online. You can check it out if you want. We just, there's not much for funding. There's not much support. So we're doing what we can in a sort of a limited basis. But it's kind of a tricky one to undress, because there's different market opportunities attached to it. There's oil opportunities, there's fiber, there's seed. And so, I mean, all of those might require different research focuses. From a rotational perspective, and I guess I was backing up. I've been doing my work in organic systems the last 3 years. And I have been generally impressed at how it has suppressed weeds, especially some of the taller varieties. There's some shorter varieties that don't do as good a job of suppressing weeds, but there's lots of claims being made about hemp. We've checked out rooting depths. There was some claims that it was a really deep rooting crop. Well, at least in our 1 year that we gathered data, that it was no deeper than spring wheat. So it would probably use water similar to spring wheat. I don't think there's any particular concern about volunteers from hemp the next year, but I guess we haven't seen that anyways. So somewhat competitive in an organic system. It's not a nitrogen fixer, so it's not going to do anything real positive then. It'll probably break up some disease cycles for cereal crops at least. But we just don't know much about the rotational aspect, to be honest.
Thank you, Perry. Pat, this in from Blaine County. Recently, they read that you're working on weed suppression in organic systems, specifically thistle. Can you comment a little bit about your objectives and where you are in that research project?
Yeah, sure, Darren. We are here at Montana State. Perry's involved in this project, as are several on campus. Fabian Manalid, Tim Seipel, Zach Miller is also involved. And really, we're targeting two perennial species, creeping or Canada thistle and field bindweed. And our goal is to really determine, can we move away from intensive tillage to control these two weeds? So we've got really a spectrum where we're looking at a very intensive tillage system, really done only at the research centers, because it would throw, I think, many people out of compliance by all the tillage that's being done. The systems where we're relying very little on tillage and a lot on things like animal grazing to try to suppress the weeds. Now we're in anywhere from 1 to the 2nd year of the study. As you can imagine, it was a bit of a challenge trying to establish treatments in fields that were infested with bindweed and Canada thistle. So in some cases, we planted and then we retreated hastily and tried to reestablish other places. But it's still pretty early in the study. I think we are seeing some things that at least tell us there are differences in these various treatments. I think we're going to have some good information for farmers, not only in Montana, but in North Dakota and in Washington. Those are 2 other states that are involved. And I will say, of the research that I've been conducting over the years, this one has generated a tremendous amount of interest. I don't know how everyone's heard about it, but really nationally. So I know it's hard to believe, but we do not have a monopoly on bindweed and thistle. There are problems pretty much everywhere.
I have a follow-up question, if I may.
Only if it's not hard.
Okay, I don't think it's that hard. But I'm curious, are you planning on evaluating biological control for bindweed specifically, or thistle?
Yes, we are. Yeah, we are. That is part of the project. Jed Eberly is a microbiologist located here at Moxon. He's the other faculty person here, and so he's very involved in that project. Really, our focus to date, for the most part, has been on biological control of creeping thistle.
Okay.
Dave Sands at Montana State University, really working separately outside of this project, I think, is looking a little bit more at bindweed.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good follow-up. Zach, we're going to stay on the weeds. How in some of your systems, in your berry systems and rotational crops, are you impacting or evaluating weed suppression?
That's a broad question. So we're working with Pat and Perry on So at Western Ag Research Center, we're working with this USDA-funded perennial weed management in organic systems project to look at managing weeds in organic vegetable farms, and also in managing perennial weeds in organic vegetable farms, and also irrigated organic grain farms. What we've seen in our irrigated organic grains is, so we're a little bit farther ahead than the other projects since we started early. We already had a similar trial on the ground, and so we're now in our third year. And we've seen really good suppression from that intense tillage. We're tilling once or twice a month, every 3 weeks, basically, in those systems. But we've also seen the downside of that. Those soils and those plots were severely broken down, lost all their structure. It's still, almost all the way through the growing season, walking through those plots, it's still like walking on a beach. The soil is just broken apart. The spring wheat that's in there is not as vigorous. It's certainly lost a lot of water and nutrient holding capacity. But we've seen also great results by rotating alfalfa. So just a couple years of alfalfa, and we compared two different types of alfalfa there because organic growers were interested. We have a treatment where we've decertified and sprayed herbicides in the fall and the spring before we planted that alfalfa, and then just stayed in organic and just planted the alfalfa and kept the certification. And really, at least at this preliminary stage, we don't see any difference between those two. They both suppress the bindweed quite well. In our horticultural trials, we're looking at basically remediation or transition techniques for vegetable farmers that have a patch of thistle or bindweed. And there we're looking at intensive tillage as sort of our reference treatment, but also just cover cropping, the fall planted rye pea, and then doing some tillage to incorporate that cover crop, and also solarization with silage tarps, and then a combo between that cover crop and the solarization. And we just started that last year in collaboration with the horticultural farm at Flathead Valley Community College in Kalispell. They're also doing the same experiment. And thus far, it looks pretty, the tarping, the solarization looks pretty good. We just pulled them off yesterday, and it was amazingly clean. And yeah, so just stay tuned. We'll have more information about how that works. In our horticultural trials, we're really, our emphasis is to manage the weeds well. We're not looking at rotations there because these are plants that will be in the ground for a decade. But this is a good opportunity to emphasize how important that is when you're planting perennial fruit trees or berry crops. Managing those weeds in the first 3 or 4 years to get those plants established is critically important. It's much better to start out being very diligent and getting those plants big so they can be much more resilient and productive. If you slip up in the first few years, you can lose plants and really stump those plants for the rest of their lives. And so we rely on an integrated approach with a little bit of hand weeding, but mostly pre-emergent herbicides applied in the fall and early spring, and then some cleanup herbicides applied in the fall or early spring as well for getting those weeds that have already come up.
Perfect. Thanks, Zach. We're going to go to Fergus County for a two-part question, and I'm going to guess this is going to go to Perry and Kevin. I think definitely Kevin. When's the next lentil variety going to come out? And Perry, what are some of the work you've done on rolling lentils and recommendations behind that?
Do you want me to go first? So, rolling lentils is this near obligate practice that we've done for decades in lentils, and yet there's all these kind of myths out there amongst producers about what time of day to do it and what plant stage to do it or not do it. And when you start digging into the literature, there just isn't any. There's almost no research that's been done on it. And having done it now for a couple, 3 years, I can understand why. It's not easy research. But so we're about 3. We've got some partner sites at Havre and Moccasin, with Peggy Lamb currently at Havre and Pat Carr at Moccasin, where we're looking at different roll timings, 5 roll timings across a number of different seed densities in lentils. And we're in the second year of that. I actually had a preliminary year prior to that, where we looked at some data to get some of those timings nailed down. Last year, we didn't have a whole lot of differences. We had one significant difference here in Bozeman, but it was at a timing that I really, I was surprised to see it at that particular timing. So I want to do it again this year and make sure, see if there's something to it. But if we do somehow improve yields by rolling lentils at the right timing, even a small difference multiplied over a huge acreage could have a pretty significant impact. So it's just kind of research that was long overdue to get some real good solid data underpinning the timing of when to roll or when not to roll lentils.
Can't you just get Kevin to make some taller lentils so you can just straight cut them and don't have to
Good
roll
job. Good job. Being a cow guy, Perry, is this a disease response or what impacts the yield on rolling other than flatten them once?
the rocks in the combine?
Well, I got that part too.
So, I mean, we do actually have an opportunity to look at interaction with fusarium on this particular project, although we're not seeing much on that angle. There is the fear that if you roll them at the wrong time, you might injure the plant and provide a vector and opportunity through those wound sites for maybe ascochyta or something like that to invade the plant. There's also sort of a physiological aspect. I mean, one of the old, and I'm going to call it a myth at this point, because after getting into our third year, I feel like I can say that. We were told not to roll right at emergence, because if you recovered that emerging plant tip somehow, that was going to keep it stuck underground, and we're just not seeing that. I mean, we're seeing the same emergence rates if we roll right at first emergence as opposed to right after seeding. And we're rolling all the way actually up to about the 10 node stage, which is just prior to flowering, and we're not even seeing much yield loss there. The first year we did it all the way to flowering. Yes, of course, we flattened things and you couldn't pick it up, and it wasn't good. It wasn't good. But so far it actually looks like it's a pretty broad window of when you can apply this technique. So,
Thank you.
Perry, is there anything with soil moisture conditions that other management considerations with rolling?
Yeah, so I mean, soil moisture definitely plays into it, right? Because if it's too wet, you may have a time in mind as a producer. Hey, I want to roll at this particular stage, whatever you become comfortable with. Mm-hmm. Well, it's too wet to go at that time. So now I've got a delay, and now I've got a delay. Matter of fact, I saw some lentils in Pat Carr's neighborhood a few years ago where the lentils were actually in full bloom by the time it had dried up enough, or at least the guy got around to thinking about rolling it. And what do you do at that point? So yeah, soil moisture matters. We had really good moisture at our site last year, so it really wasn't a limitation. And we actually have adjusted our roller to get the same kind of down pressure on a little 6-foot roller that you can get with a large commercial roller. We got to put extra rail weights on it and fill it up with water and make sure it's very heavy. But if the soil is very dry, like it was this year, we don't get as good a roll when it's dry. But I guess that's an important question that we really haven't tackled as much. We've had good moist soil at 3 of the timings that we've rolled this year. One time was pretty dry, and we didn't get as good a roll even with that heavy weight.
Perfect. I guess Kevin's on the hot seat for a new variety.
All right. So, you phrased the question, when would the next lentil variety be available? As far as the Montana breeding program here, the question is, when will the first one be available? Again, it's a young program here. We're in our 4th season, field season, and the first one was primarily, first couple actually, were primarily just evaluating germplasm that I had access to. During that same time, again, just like with the other crops, we've been making crosses, advancing those to a stage where we're comfortable making selections. I kind of jumped the gun a little bit, moved the schedule forward in the pipeline a year ago. So last fall, with the populations I had, I made a single plant selection, single seeds actually went into the populations that we harvested in 2019. I sieved those for for specific characteristics, the seed size, shape, the color, other characteristics that we could see, and planted those in the greenhouse. And there were about, we'll say 225 as a rough number that I planted in the greenhouse, harvested a very nice set of seed from those plants. And those are currently in for cereal programs, they referred to as head rows. I call them plant rows in the field. And I'm really quite pleased with them. Zach, you mentioned the plant height. That's one of the things, and the material that I'm looking at, some of it is taller than some of the others, and that also depends on which market class it is. And these lines that I have selected are, they cover the range from small greens to large greens, and there's also some small reds, medium-sized reds in this set of single plants that are in the field. Pretty excited about that, at least to be at that stage. They're one cycle behind where the peas are in the program. So next year I'll have a large plot that I can evaluate yield and see it on a larger multi-row experiment, multi-row plot to see how they perform. But I'm pretty excited. Some of the seed that I picked is pretty interesting. Hopefully it fits the markets that I'm aware of. And as far as the next new variety, it's going to be, a couple, 3 years, probably longer than that. It's just going to take time to increase the seed, get it tested, have the appropriate number of yield trial sites. The data set has to have a specific number of locations. How we address and how we get that accomplished, I think we're going to have to be creative with all of the pulse crops in the program. But I'm pretty excited with where we're at right now. We're moving as fast as we can, a little more aggressive than I have been in the past with it, but I think it's going to pay off in the end.
Thanks, Kevin. Good update. Abby, I'm going to swing back to you and I'm going to ask a question. Can you talk about, seeing how you've been here for 1 month, can you talk about how you see your program developing and how you see you interacting with extension and agents, and how are you going to handle the statewide deal and how you move forward?
Awesome. That's a great question. My background is in county extension offices in Michigan and Colorado, so I definitely understand what it's like to be a county agent with 10,000 responsibilities. So my programming is going to be directed, I'm hoping, a lot by the agents themselves. And so I'd like to get to know a lot of the county agents, what they're seeing in their localities and how I can best serve them, what I can do to make their jobs easier, and the types of programming they're interested in seeing, and the types of program formats that they might want to explore. And then my background is also in pollinator conservation, and that's a passion of mine. And so I'm interested in incorporating a lot of pollinator conservation, horticulture strategies in a lot of what we're developing in terms of fact sheets, guides, materials, and looking into some potential research on that topic as well. So I'm hoping to mostly be available to agents and the public at large, and be able to help them with anything that they need horticulture related.
Great, thank you. I'm going to follow up real quick with the question. You mentioned pollinators. And in this, we had a robust discussion about cover crops and flowering plants and some of that earlier today. And how do you see you maybe using your skill set to help expand it into maybe just from horticulture into general production agricultures? Or is there a possibility to make that bridge or jump in with Western Ag Research Center and some of the work they're doing in their fruit?
I think there definitely is a possibility to make that bridge. I'm really looking forward to visiting the Western Research Station soon. But at the Hort Farm here on campus in Bozeman, there have been a lot of ideas about potential ground covers that can be used in conjunction with the fruit that they're growing. I know that a lot of ground covers like clover are very, very vital to pollinators, especially early in the season. And they can be a really good resource if done appropriately. And I know even home gardeners are interested in incorporating some sort of ground covers as part of their turf or replacing turf with them. So there are some great alternatives, and I'm looking forward to having these discussions. And I think there are opportunities to bridge these interests.
Outstanding.
We have an interesting new trial at the Western Ag Research Center in collaboration with David Weaver, looking at using cowpeas as a potential cover crop to support the parasites, the small wasps that attack the wheat stem sawfly. And it's the first time we've grown it. It's a really interesting crop. Cowpeas are black-eyed peas, or black-eyed peas are a variety of cowpea. Kind of like a soybean, but provides nectar on the plant surfaces that those tiny wasps that can control sawfly can get access to, because those small wasps are so small they can't really get into a lot of our legume flowers.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, a lot of beneficial insects and natural enemies are present in the landscape. So being able to harness their natural abilities to control these pest populations is always going to be really a great way to beef up your landscape.
So I just wanted to have a quick follow-up too. So we've got a demo trial at our research farm where we have like 30 different crop entries in there, and they're all been in flowering stages the last going on 2 weeks. But we've got one in there called Niger. I don't know, Zach, if you've ever grown Niger, but it's got the pollinators, and they're mostly honeybees and bumblebees, and so I don't know if that fits the a wide enough spectrum. But they've got the pollinators, have got the choice of any plot they want along that suite. We've got mustards, we've got canolas, we've got vetches. I mean, anything they want. And boy, that Niger seed just seems to be, everything's in there. And so I wondered, Zach, if you'd had any experience with Niger, and it seems like there's, it's a specialty market, obviously, but it would be.
Yeah, what is it?
So it's actually it goes for bird feed. So it looks like sort of like a miniature safflower, I guess, multi-headed plant.
It's a sunflower family.
I should know that, but I would think it has to be in the Asteraceae. Yeah, it has to be in that family. And anyways, pollinators just at least we've done this 3 years now, and every year I go through there, and I have to we're doing some growing degree day notes on it also, just trying to do comparative growth staging for all these different crops, and all the pollinators always seem to be in the Niger. So for whatever that's worth.
There are quite a few. Sorry, go ahead.
Nope.
I was going to say there are quite a few plants that are more attractive to pollinators based on maybe what they provide. So if the Niger has a higher nectar quantity or a better pollen protein content, I think you might have pollinators that are going to be other flowers. And then some pollinators are more specific. So honeybees have this behavior called flower fidelity, in which they're going to, if a few bees go to the Niger and it seems like a really good resource, the rest of the hive is also going to go and harness that resource before they move on to a different type of plant.
So being the person in the room that's been at Montana State 27 years, I can tell you, Perry, the last person I knew to grow that was Dave Wichman. And it was in one of his works when he was looking at expanding the bird seed world, when safflower and some of that was several years ago. So just FYI, if we want to go back to old data, check out Dave Wichman. So, but good dialogue. This is in from Ravalli County for Pat. I think they're cheating on you, Zach. Sorry. There seems to be a question of tillage versus no tillage in organic systems. And it seems like you're both using two different avenues. So Pat, how do you see expanding no-till and organic versus what Zach's doing down maybe not best management practice, but you got to do it to control it? I'm expanding from the initial question here, but I see there's a dichotomy essentially is what people are seeing. And so how do you see that expanding in organic systems?
Darren, I told you before we started, I only get an easy question. So.
Blame Ravalli County.
Well, I do think organic has a place, and I mean, to move beyond the study that I talked about earlier, Perry and I both, and this was back when I was still at North Dakota State University and Perry was over here at MSU, we were doing what a lot of researchers were doing and really looking at this organic no-till system that really grew out of the East. And originally, the origins are down in Brazil with conventional no-till. And what was relied on and is relied on heavily still are cover crops, where they're mechanically killed, but the mulch remains on the surface for weed suppression. And, you know, this was probably longer than I'd like to admit now, but I don't know. 12, 13 years ago, this was a really, really hot topic across the US into Canada. The Europeans, this was one of the few places where we actually got in before the Europeans got involved. And the bottom line was a few of us who didn't know any better tried continuous organic no-till. You know, think conventional no-till, we were trying to do it organically. And I think we all found the same thing. One, those who told us it couldn't be done were correct. And two, you had about a 4 or 5 year window is usually what would happen before the weeds would overwhelm you. If you think about weeds, you know, what group of weeds would just take care of the system, and it's perennials. You know, it's the ones we talked about earlier. It's bindweed or creeping thistle, but any perennial weed, once that became established, there really isn't a cover crop that you can grow in the mulch that you're going to create that's going to suppress that. And it's hard to keep them out. I mean, we all know that. I mean, the conventional farmer uses herbicides, or historically has. The organic farmer's going to use tillage. And, you know, I think we could talk, you know, at nauseum about this. So I think in terms of organic systems, that type of system, it can work in a place like Montana, but it's going to be a rotational no-till system. That system relies really heavily on they call them a roller crimper, but it's basically a glorified roller. And then you've got some kind of blades and various configurations that you use to kill the cover crop. And, you know, when we think about that and you think of the size of Montana farms, that's one challenge I think there is, you know, running a roller over all of your organic land to kill the cover crop. It's a lot easier to do if the roller's a little bit smaller, the land's fairly level. But it still does have a place. And that's where the animals come in too. You know, that was the other thing that we really brought into the picture. Perry did here in Montana, Martin Enns did up in Canada, is to bring in animals and strategically graze. And I think if you combine animals with cover crops, aggressive, you know, annual crops, you can probably no-till for a couple of years before you have to get out of that and strategically till, and then you can go back in. And really that, if you look at going to the study that I did talk about earlier, that's we do have you know, a couple of the systems in place that really mimic that. So I do think it has a place in Montana. I'm more convinced than ever that continuous organic no-till is something for the next generation to tackle. But we can at least reduce tillage in the state of Montana when growing crops organically. But we'll probably have to still rely on tillage at some point to take care of the perennial weed species that become established. Do you agree, Perry or Zach? Or
yeah, just to jump in and summarize, and let me know if I get anything wrong here about the good work that you two did.
Okay, that's right.
There's also a fundamental constraint for dryland agriculture and no-till for using that cover crop system in Montana, because where those cover cropping systems are successful, you're growing about 4 tons of cover crop to lay down as that mulch to suppress those annual weeds. And in Montana and North Dakota and all of the Northern Great Plains, it's often too difficult to grow that much biomass in your cover to be able to suppress those weeds. And when you do, because we're in a water limited environment, you've used up the water, and so the crop you plant next isn't going to grow very well. And these systems will work fine in a 30-inch a year rainfall environment, but in Montana, because we're so, you know, it's semi-arid and a near desert in some dryland conditions, that kind of system just, there's some fundamental constraints to it.
Yeah, I would agree. Go ahead.
I would agree. And our site at Bozeman, actually, as you guys both know, was actually a wetter site than Montana. And so even there, when we had extra water to play with, we were able to we were fairly successful with 36 months, you know, a phase of no-till out of a 5-year rotation. But, you know, there's a reason that we're now studying perennial weeds at that site.
Right.
So I'm gonna add a quick question in. I know Zach's been associated with it, and maybe on the periphery, Pat and Perry, but there is a difference how livestock graze. And what was the differences on some of your effects when sheep were involved versus live beef cattle? Zach, on some of that, I think the sheep were far more effective.
You're the beef guy. Most of the work we've done has just been with sheep. We've done work with both sheep and poultry here at the Western Ag Research Center, and at Fort Ellis, where Perry does a lot of his work with this organic project. Sheep have been used exclusively, right, Perry?
That is correct. Yeah.
But I can say anecdotally, I can't say that word right now. In our trials with sheep, they really prefer bindweed. They'll go after it right away, and that backs up research that was done in the 40s and 50s. They don't avoid it. They seem to like it quite a bit, and they keep it browsed down. And so those perennial weeds aren't putting energy back into their root system and should be over time weaker.
Yeah, and just a quick on the beef end, I think we have a hard time terminating plants with beef just on their grazing style versus sheep that are able to get down there and get at it. Where if we're going with a high intensity grazing to target that, I think we have a more effective job using sheep. So, yeah.
Just to add one little thing, it is, just like with herbicides, if you're a conventional farmer, the sheep or the animals have to get on the right time. And Perry Brent, another MSU researcher who's involved in the project, I think didn't realize it, but he was commenting on that. He talked about the fact that, boy, they did a great job on the creeping thistle down in Bozeman and not near as good a job up here. And I think it had everything to do with the fact as to when the thistle was grazed in Bozeman versus up here. It was afterwards. So it's fun. It's really fun research to be involved with, because timing is really everything on a lot of these treatments that we have in place. You hit it at the right time. If the conditions are right, you'll get a fantastic control. If you hit it at just the wrong time, you miss that window, it's night and day.
Yeah. Well, good segue, Pat. Just a little plug for our 1 to 2 o'clock. Brent Rader, our newest sheep extension specialist in the state of Montana, will be on. We'll have Tim Seipel. And I forgot to pull my list up before I segued. Jessica Torian talking about forages, Pat Carr about annual forages, and Brent Rader and Sam Weifels on livestock end. So we'll be transitioning into some of that other dialogue, and we'll be able to pick that up. Kevin, I feel like people have been ignoring you a little bit. I haven't seen any questions come in, but can you just bring us up to speed and anything else pulses related that you want to do real quick?
Sure. So I guess I've already alluded and mentioned that I'm happy with where the program is at this point, taking the aggressive approach to move forward and making selections and getting the pipeline filled up with each of the various stages. The next year or two, we'll be seeing yield trials at some of the research centers around the state, which is pretty exciting to me. I'd made some selections last year on peas that, it was the first time had looked at them in a single row to get an idea of what their growth habit might be, how they perform. And I was cautiously optimistic and was mentioning that, what they looked like this year would kind of determine how good the selections were last year. And they look very good. I'm very happy with their growth. There's quite a range of variation from just above the knee-high plant type to above my waist. And they're still upright in that high today. That doesn't mean—
How tall are you, Kevin?
Well, we'll say that the waist high is about 34, 36 inches or something like that. So anyway, they're nice looking plots, and the yield is where it's at. We have to see what they're going to yield compared to the check that we have in there. The other thing that is really kind of taken a highlight and a quick step forward in the program is looking at end use. Protein is a huge focus point of the industry right now. How do we get more of it? How consistent can it be? That's something that we're looking at as well, making crosses specific for that. Some of those crosses admittedly are kind of a hope based on the data that's out there. We don't have a lot of data of a wide range of germplasm from the state to know what lines that are reported to be high in protein. Are they really high in protein in Montana? So that's where I'm headed with it, is increasing some of those prospects, I guess we'll call them, as parents, and then we'll evaluate those on a wider scale as time and resources allow. But I've already made some of those crosses in the hope that they'll be the right ones, and we can make selections as we go along. So the highlights are the pipelines getting filled for all 3 crops. Peas first, lentils a year behind, chickpeas a couple of years behind that. But across the whole set, we're looking at quality and not just what the seed looks like for the traditional markets, but the more recent markets of fractionation, understanding how much protein is there. And I think the next step beyond that is, what's the functionality of the protein that's within the pea or within the legume? How is it used? And some of those questions are what we need to know on the research side, the scientific approach. We need to know what we're looking for. And once we know that, we can make steps toward those selections and use those technologies and techniques that are out there to determine which materials to keep and which ones to cross with.
Kevin, can I jump in really quick? You're talking a lot about end use quality and processing and harvest ease.
Yep.
What about pest resistance
Okay.
or other traits like end fixation? Because for a lot of growers, that's one of the big benefits of rotating into pulse crops, is the additional fertility that they've got.
Sure. Yeah. So that's a great question as well. And another aspect that the nature of breeding programs is that we look at a lot of different things at the same time, trying to bring the best of everything into one or a few lines. On the nitrogen fixation side, working with Clayne Jones right now, looking at a set of varieties of peas and lentils to get an understanding of what are their relative efficiencies or abilities to fix nitrogen. And with the couple of years of data that we have, it looks like there are differences in variety or across varieties. We will use that information to make crosses, and as fortune would have it, one of the lines that seems to do really well, at least with the preliminary analysis, is a line that I really like to make crosses with. So I have some of that, those crosses made and making selections from those populations. The challenge with that is being able to move forward with early stage material where there isn't a lot of seed. How can we do those evaluations efficiently and ideally in a greenhouse setting, so that we can look at individual plants, make the selections there, and then take the desired materials to the field. So that's a challenge we have, but at least we know that there is some difference among germplasm for the ability to fix that we can make use of. You mentioned diseases. That's another very large area that we're moving quite quickly. And actually, we have a nursery or an experiment that we're conducting in the greenhouse right now, that we are evaluating parents that I've used in the pea breeding program for resistance to Fusarium oxysporum, so the Fusarium wilt. So we've run two sets of that material. The one is completed, the other one we're about halfway through. We're able to use that technology or that approach, the methods in the greenhouse, confirmed some of the reactions that I knew for the material, and learned about some of the more new and different lines that I have made crosses with. So we're going to continue that, not just for race 1, but race 2 will be next. So we can start pulling those genes together in the selections that we make. We have inoculum prepared through collaboration with Mary Burrows and one of her graduate students to look at Aphanomyces. So we're going to do that as well. That's the next on the docket. The Fusarium root rots, so Fusarium solani, Avanaceum, and there are several others that are involved. That's on the list as well of interest. We just don't have those particular tests in the greenhouse in place at the moment, but they're coming. So, if you look across the program, there's quite a lot of different objectives that we have to look at simultaneously, really, across diseases, agronomic performance, quality and end use, and a number of different things. So doing quite a lot and happy with what we've accomplished at this point.
And we want them all tomorrow, Kevin.
I realize that. That's why I'm coming up there tomorrow to harvest.
No, that's great. Hey, we're running out of time, everybody. I'm going to throw one quick question out for Zach and Abby because it's from Great Falls, but I'm going to direct them to your emails after I read the question. It says, what is the most difficult part of starting and eventually maintaining a small fruit orchard or horticultural vegetable enterprise? And this is out of Great Falls. So for this person, if you would, I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to say their emails. Why don't you redirect that to Abby and Zach as we move forward, because we're just running out of time and I have to get the next group in. So Abby, what's your email?
My email address is abia@montana.edu. So ABIYA.SAEED. Or they can call me at 994-6523.
Perfect. Thank you. Zach?
My email is dboss@montana.edu.
Nice. So
No,
everybody,
It's zachariah.miller@montana.edu.
Yep.
But you can find it and a lot more information on our website and a lot more of the other field day videos through the department's website. It's all set up and I hope you can take a look.
right. And I just got prompted by our admin, Sharon. She did remind me that everybody's contact information is on the virtual field day website. If you got here and got there, you'd be able to see it rather than have everybody go through the emails. I want to thank everybody and all of our panel today. It's been a great, robust discussion. Probably got a little different direction than we probably thought we were going to start with it today, but that's the fun part of doing live. It's been a great day. I want to thank you again. I would like to forward to do this again next year, possibly if it's great. And with that, have a great day. And for the public, we're going to dismiss our current cast of Gilligan's Island.
Characters.
Yeah, characters of Gilligan's Island. And we'll let the next bunch in at 1 o'clock. We're going to take a 1 hour break for lunch. You don't have to turn down your YouTube. Just join us back at 1 o'clock. And again, thanks everybody. It's been a great day. Have a good one.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.